This is the fifth Sunday in Easter. And today we're looking at the Gospel of John, talking about the vine and the branches. There's a few things going on here. One is this is one of Jesus' I am statements in the Gospel of John. We looked at one last week where it was I am the Good Shepherd. Others are I am the way, the truth, and the light. I am the gate. So Jesus is identifying common things around that everybody related to. But in addition to that, he's also tapping into the symbolism of the Hebrew culture. Last week with the shepherds, shepherds was a common reference to the people of Israel. This week with vines and wine, he's tapping into another metaphor of Israel that we see coming up in Isaiah and Psalms and Ezekiel, talking about Israel being part of the vine, and that they haven't always respected that. They've pulled their branches, they've pulled themselves away from the central vine, and as a result have been destroyed. So anybody hearing this language, anybody reading this language of John would instantly connect with the messages and promises of the Hebrew people. Now, the other thing going on here is that Jesus is saying this during the Last Supper discourse. So, the time where he is spending with his disciples, the last time he's going to be together, the time when he wants to get in the last of the messages. In addition to that, and this is some of the complications that I go through when I'm preparing this every week, not only are you looking at what is going on in the story itself, but what was going on in the community that was hearing this for the first time. So, what was happening for first century Palestinians and what were they experiencing? Some theory is that they were starting to see a dissolution, a breaking apart of those who were following Jesus. And if you really think about it, that makes complete sense, because when you get really excited about something, when it's brand new, you're full of energy to support it. But after a couple of generations, it gets tired and it's not as exciting and it's not as life giving. So you start to pull away and you start to look for other things. We have this history in the Hebrew scriptures itself, where we hear of the Israelites who had left Egypt and were all gung ho to follow Moses until it got really complicated, and then they started to look for other gods and started to worshiping things, and of course disaster befell them, and that's kind of the ongoing theme. But in the early Christian church, the same thing happened. People fell away. People got really comfortable mixing their public Roman life with Christian thought. The purity of those early days kind of broke down, and leaders would be quite concerned about this. So it's with these various levels of interpretation that we go to the scripture this morning. So the history of the Israeli people and the metaphors that they used, the experience of Jesus with his followers, talking with them at the last opportunity he's going to, really trying to instill in them what they're going to experience and what it means to follow him. And thirdly, the community of first century Palestine. What is going on there? What is potentially causing problems that they have to deal with? And we come to this metaphor of the vine and branches breaking apart, and some branches falling to the point where they're just picked up and thrown into the fire because there's no other point for them. Now, sometimes through history, this has been used to mean that there are people who are branches and there are people who are not branches that are healthy and they will be tossed out. That kind of dualism doesn't help, because that is not what's going on in this story. It's not that some are in and some are out and that's always the way it's going to be. It's really talking with the disciples and through the disciples to all followers to say, you have to be intertwined in the message of Christ. You can't just do this half-heartedly. You can't just show up and, for 1 hour on a Sunday decide now is your time to be Christian, but you don't live it. There's no part of you that is sharing this message the rest of your week. You don't bring it to your family. You don't bring it to your friends. That's not the way this works. That kind of thing is withered and cut off. To be Christian, to be part of the vine, to be the branches, means also a great deal of pruning and plucking. I had a friend recently, in response to this passage talk about what pruning looked like. She had observed it several years ago. And anybody who's been part of a vineyard or even taking care of roses, quite frankly, understands the pruning process. You have to cut back to the point where you don't know if there's going to be anything left of the plant. And then over the next while, as it grows again, suddenly you have more fruit, you've got more bulbs, you've got more roses, you've got more everything than you had before. But that plucking has to happen first, that pruning, that cutting back. And in Jesus' own way, he was warning the disciples, and through the disciples, us, there's going to be pruning and plucking. You are not going to be able to live a Christian life, share Jesus' message, and think that everything you have always had is going to continue on tickety-boo, and there's not going to be any hardships. It doesn't work that way. The pruning we experience in life can be people telling you, I don't want to hear about it. Or it can be as ghastly as people being cut off, having relationships dissolve because they don't want to be part of your Christian life and your Christian experience. All of these are experiences of pruning, which will eventually lead to more growth, more opportunities to share with others. But we've got to go through that from time to time. We've got to be isolated, cut off, made uncomfortable from time to time in order for us to regenerate and regrow something more. But none of that is going to happen if we are cut off from the vine. This is the fun thing about metaphors. You can really work it. And in this particular one, Jesus is reminding them that he is the vine. Now, it's partially an acknowledgement that he is the Messiah, because in Hebrew literature, God talks about being the vine, or they talk about God being the vine and how Israel keeps falling apart. In this Gospel of John, we very clearly hear that Jesus is the vine. Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the Christ. No quibbling or questioning about who he is. He knows who he is, what he's here for, and what he's going to experience. He is setting up people to understand we have to be intimately connected with the message that Jesus is giving. The theological term for it is indwelling. So Jesus is in us the way we are in Jesus, and together that relationship is what strengthens our Christianity. It's not something we can play at. It's something we have to be very intentional about, because it won't take much for us to find ourselves not producing fruit, that we're not producing a sense of the gospel for other people. Again, not about going out and bashing people over the head with what we believe, but just living how we are, who we are. Throughout history, the only way the Christian church had the Christian message, and I'm specifically meaning the message of Jesus, not necessarily the message of internal denominational desires for power or anything else like that. The only way the Christian message, the ecclesia, the people church, has been spread is by others watching Christians. It has the opposite effect too. In modernity here, we're seeing a whole lot of people turned off of Christianity by watching Christians. We have the choice. We can either be interconnected, indwelling with Jesus, or we cannot, and we've lost the plot. There's no reason for us to talk about our faith because we're obviously not living it. But when we live it, when we demonstrate what Jesus taught us to be, when we're out there in the public showing that our faith informs our choices, and our faith is inclusion and love, and that is radiating from us, people sit up. They take notice. One of the greatest moments of conversion that ever happened in the Christian church, I'm not sure if I've told you about this one before or not, but one of the greatest moments of conversion was after the Justinian plague, where everybody else had been literally tossing their dead and their sick into the street or running away as much as they possibly could. It was the Christians who took these folks and nursed them, and a lot of them died themselves. But it did something for the imagination of those who were witness to this. And it said, who is this? What is this power that you believe that is so completely controlling how you treat the world? What's going on there? Because I want part of that. throughout history. Anytime there has been a surge of conversions to Christianity, whether it's in the old church, whether it's in the medieval church, the Renaissance church, the Victorian church, the modern church, nothing has happened where there hasn't been a showing of Christians living their faith, living that love, and other people observing and saying, I want that too. And it has never been, I want to be part of that specific denomination. It has always been, I want to be part of that following of Jesus that so drives you that you are willing to put yourself second and someone else first. That's a powerful, powerful message that we are capable of sharing, that we've always had, always been able to do. But we can't do that unless we are interconnected with Jesus, intimately connected, believe to the point of being pruned to pain, that what is going to come is far greater than what we've been, and that being connected with Jesus is what is going to drive that. Being disconnected is a dead end. It's not about people specifically, but about how each of us behaves. We have to have that indwelling, that interconnectedness, that complete conviction that by being connected with Jesus, we can transform the world. That is what's driving us. That is the vine where we are the branches. The vine also doesn't move. The vine grows and it can be trained up in certain directions, but the vine itself is not what blows in the wind. The vine itself is not what can produce. The vine just holds it all together. It's our job to produce. It's our job to stay connected, and it's our job to be the ones that show the world what Jesus' love is all about. Because ultimately, when you boil this metaphor down and all the messages that come along with it, it is how do we show love for the world? How are we the embodiment of grace and acceptance? How are we going to be the ones that show that no distinction matters? That you are in, you have to choose to be in, but you are in that love. And that love will help you continue to produce. No greater message. Christianity in a nutshell is kind of simple that way.